When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite, looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to the blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, their profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, Beyond the Headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today.
This is Dan Yeager, Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw 3D. You're listening to Crazy Train Radio.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, the Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today.
Before we get started, folks, we also wanted to let everybody know that is listening to this interview. It is being recorded on the D&D Fitness Apparel line. D&D Fitness Apparel is a Memphis-based comedy and clothing startup brand that is helping you reclaim the quality gym wear that you want to have on, but also does all the talking for you because you want to be comfortable while you are there to
Pump you up!
Feel free to visit them at dndfitapparel.com. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this next guest, and I tried to mention during our cancer fundraiser that he is probably one of the smartest men I have come across. Right up there with a Bill Moseley, and was shy to take the compliment, but I'm going to stick with it. Most fans would know him from Texas Chainsaw 3D, but he is a man of many hats. Dan Yeager. Dan, how you doing, sir?
I'm well, thank you. Nice to talk to you again.
Yes. So Dan is pulling up a cigar, and this is one of the things I would say you're an expert in. And my co-host that normally joins us is a cigar guy too. And
Yeah.
he does this thing at the Boxing Hall of Fame because he used to have a vote in the Boxing Hall of Fame in New York there.
Mm.
And on like the Friday or Saturday night before the induction, they have like some of the Hall of Famers, past and current, and
Yeah.
himself just sit around it's like a little cigar club they do. So
Yeah, it's a very sociable habit, you know.
yeah,
It's by far the most sociable thing I do. Only within some circles,
yeah,
the anti-smoke.
yeah. And he's actually coming in as we speak, so that's perfect timing that we are talking about Mr. Young. Mr. Young, how are you, sir? I say he's like Beetlejuice. You say his name 3 times and he appears.
Mm.
Oh, what
Brian,
are we
how are you?
smoking? I am good. How are you?
All right. And I was just talking about your little tradition at the Hall of Fame with the cigars, as Dan has just lit up one himself.
I saw that. What are you smoking, Dan?
This is a Baccarat Candela.
Ah, very nice. I earlier today had a CAO Brasilia, which is I love the Brasilia.
Yeah.
You know, we're not too far apart. You're in Ithaca, right?
About 15 miles west of Ithaca.
Yeah, I'm in Buffalo.
Oh, yeah, all right.
So
I've been
what
to
you
Buffalo
gotta
many
do
times.
is make a little road trip to get the best wings in Buffalo, and then to go to the best cigar shop
Yeah, that'd be fun.
and hang out and have some smokes and some wings, and you'd
What,
love it.
one of my favorite places to go is the Roycroft campus in East Aurora.
Okay. That's very close.
Yeah, I love that place. I'm a big collector of Roycroft books, the Lusitania.
Mm-hmm. There's, by the way, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm a great fan and admirer, and we've never spoken, and I'm thrilled.
Well, it's nice to talk to you too. We'll have to get together and swap stories one of these days.
Now, are you a wing fan?
Pardon?
Are you a chicken wing fan?
Oh, sure. Who isn't?
Okay, and then I will get you the best wings in the world, hands down.
Better than I make.
But yes,
Okay.
and I only say that because they're better than ones I
All
make.
right. All right. Yeah, I don't doubt a professional could do a better job.
You know, as a Buffalonian, as a big fat Buffalonian, I know where my wings are.
All right.
And you know, it's funny, before we actually get into the fun business as well, Brian, I have to give Brian credit for once. And that's, yeah, I know. You laugh about it, but that's part of Brian's charm and shtick, talking about the wings and cigars. Yeah. And he made a recommendation to a Southern listener who you actually met during the event last week, Dan. And there was a sauce. What was it? Frank's
hot sauce.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only one.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
A Buffalo original.
And Matthew said, "Hey, tell Brian," and that's when I put you guys together in the chat. So I know you're on limited time, Brian, because of things going on, and I'll leave that at that.
Absolutely. That's why I'm on the phone and no one can see me.
But yes. Would you like
I'm
to
not
start
naked,
off on
the...
Well, it wouldn't be the first time, and I'll tell that story about Phil later off air. You'll appreciate that one, Brian. But would you like to start off with the entertainment side of things, sir?
Uh, no, but it's all you. Go ahead.
Okay. So Dan, it's funny, and Brian, you'll appreciate this. Dan is a gentleman who is a jack of all trades, and he actually was working in what was it, a cabinet business in North Hollywood before you decided to give acting a try?
Um, yes, I was in. Well, I started in architecture. I didn't go to a regular high school. I went to a vocational school and learned architectural drafting. And out of a class of, I think there were 20 odd students, I was the only one who, no, actually, there was one other guy who kind of in a peripheral way used his architectural drafting and design education professionally. But yeah, I did that for years, and then went to work for an architect who built his own projects. He built big, expensive houses in Malibu, Pacific Palisades. All those houses that burned down in Pacific Palisades last year. Those a few of those were ones I worked on. But then, that was such a revelation to me, that, you could design and then build something. I eventually got my general contractor's license. And so I was the only one in the company that could take a project from, here's design concept to here are your keys, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner. I just loved it. But the problem with it, especially in LA, is that a project's life cycle was 3 to 5 years from beginning to end. And that was just, it was a grueling process, but good, rewarding. I mean, certainly when you were done, you had this big mansion for somebody with way more money than you had. But, then there was an economic downturn in LA back in the late 90s, and I was trying to find something to do, and I found a drafting job at a cabinet company. They had a computer system, a design system that nobody in the company knew how to use. And I told the owner, I said, I've never met a computer program I couldn't figure out. And so he said, well, if you can figure this out, you've got a job. And so I sat there for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours and went back into him, and then handed him a set of drawings for his project. He couldn't believe it. And so it was shortly after that I realized, oh my God, you can go from, design concept to finished project in a matter of weeks. And that was just so much more exciting. It was certainly a much smaller scale, but, still exciting. And that company, we did a lot of really, really interesting projects. I think the most interesting one was, there was a high rise in downtown LA, 333 South Hope, and they were remodeling the lobby, and they needed a security desk. And the architect who designed the thing designed this, 25-foot long granite, stainless steel, and bronze monstrosity with a 3,000-pound bronze framed building directory that cantilevered off the front of this desk. And he had no idea how to build it. I had no idea nobody had any idea how to build it. And so anyway, that one took a few months, but engineering it required a structural engineer. The thing was so heavy, you couldn't just set it on a floor in a building. You had to make sure it was it was structurally supported. And my experience in building big houses with swimming pools on the edge of cliffs paid off there. But anyway, there was all sorts of fun stuff. But yeah, anyway, by 2008, another economic downturn struck, and by that time I was general manager, and faced with the prospect, we had cut staff, fired a lot of people, and I hated that part of the job. Oh, that was the worst. And we got rid of everybody we could, still stay in business without. But it was down to, we were going to have to start cutting into the meat and bone of the company. And I realized that I could either lay off 5 of my best cabinet makers or quit. And so I went into the owner and said, hey, this company can't survive with me and them. So, I'll go find something else to do. I was a fool. I thought I had enough money in the bank to last me a couple of years. I did not.
LA.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was an interesting, but that was the point at which I decided, you know what? Actually, I'll tell the story if you don't mind.
No, tell. That's what we're here.
My brother came to visit from Las Vegas. My whole family lives in Las Vegas still. And he came down to LA to visit, and we were sitting on my couch drinking beers and talking about life. And I didn't have a job. This was February 20th, 2009, a Friday. I remember the date. And there was I don't remember exactly what he said, but we were talking about, what the hell are you going to do with your life now? And there was something he said that made me think, if I could do anything, and, money was not the object, I would want to work in the movie business. And I didn't tell him that, but my little brain was working away on it, and I decided, I used to be an actor back in I was an extra in a movie with Christopher Lee and Mariska Hargitay in 1984. I used to do that, and I enjoyed it. And so anyway, I thought, well, all right, I had dabbled in the acting in those intervening years, just doing amateur theater and stuff. But anyway, when I was doing that movie with Mariska Hargitay, I had met at I was doing kind of handyman work for this rich guy who lived outside of Vegas, and his wife had a friend staying with them. It was Robert Quarry, who played Count Yorga the Vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Back in what was that, 1970, 71? Anyway,
Brian, you would know that. Do
you know that, Brian?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the date. Anyway,
he's a historian with it.
he was such a nice guy. He was very encouraging when he found out I was, doing extra work and trying to get into the movie business. he gave me his phone number, and he told me, you should just move to LA. He said, you will make a living playing monsters because you're so tall. And I was very thin back then. Anyway, I would run into him at family functions in the intervening years, and he would always ask me, are you moving to LA? Are you moving to LA? And I kept lying to him and saying, yeah, I'll move to LA. And then we kind of lost contact. Fortunately, I never had to lie to him again. But I did finally move to LA, and not to do movies, but to do architecture.
Well,
and so anyway, we sitting there on the couch. I decided, all right, the next day I was going to start Googling or whatever the search engine was back then in 2000. I think it was Google, looking for acting classes. And I found two that seemed likely. One was this place over on the west side of town where they really just prey on aspiring actors and, blow smoke up their ass and tell them they're great until they finally quit. Meanwhile, they, pay the fees for the classes and stuff. It isn't, one of the serious places. And the other one was this independent guy named Joel Asher. And he was not that far from my house. And so anyway, I decided that on Monday I was going to call Joel and see if he let me come by and talk about it, which I did. He had me do a scene from The Goodbye Girl, and he videoed it. And it was the scene where Richard Dreyfuss is on the phone trying to convince who is it? Marsha Mason?
Marsha Mason was
Yeah.
my girl.
Yeah. He's trying to convince Marsha Mason to let him in the house to talk. And so anyway, I did this short little bit, and I was terrible. I've always been terrible at cold readings, but anyway, I did it, and I did the best I could. And Joel turns off the camera, and he comes over, and he didn't say anything for a second, and then finally says, "Well, that was interesting." And I said, "Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate you seeing me." I figured, all right, well, I'm going over to the west side to, have smoke blowing on my ass for a while. But he said, no. He says, people have careers being interesting. He said, it's worth a try. He says, I don't know. I'm not going to make any guarantees. He says, you're going to be the oldest person in my class. I said, that's all right. This was 2009. And the class started the next day. I said, all right, so that'll work out. I'll be here. And so I drove home kind of feeling like an idiot. Here's a middle-aged, 45-year-old idiot who wants to be a movie star. That was kind of pathetic. And I thought, I knew I could call my mom and she'd say, "Oh yeah, that's great." She always wanted to get into the movie business. But, I was looking for some firmer affirmation. And then I thought, oh hell, I should call Robert Quarry. I hadn't talked to him in 15 years. And I thought, he might have some encouraging words. Anyway, I got home that Monday and I Googled him. I figured, well, I'll find out who his agent is, have his agent, get him a message. Because I didn't have his phone number anymore. And the first thing it came up with was his obituary.
Ooh.
He died that Friday, January 20th. And so willing to grasp at any straw the universe was willing to extend, I took it. And yeah, that was the beginning of my rebirth as an actor.
Where does Frank Marlowe come in? Was he teaching his class, or
he was I was with Joel for about, I don't know, 6 months, and then I found this other class he was teaching, which was a much more, camera intensive, camera technique kind of class. And so I started taking classes with him, and he was awesome. Anyway, he was very encouraging. We made a little short film in the parking lot of this acting school. It was called The Hammer, and I was just, dirty and dusty from doing a bunch of construction work. And he shot this little thing. He was a commercial director mainly. But we shot this little thing. He cut it together. And basically, I was this stalker guy who eventually bashed a woman's head in with a hammer. That was basically the entire thing. And it was really a fun little piece.
Not for the woman.
Huh? No, I think she enjoyed it. It was fun. But anyway, it was funny. I hadn't thought about it, and it was after we had done Texas Chainsaw. I ran across it online somewhere, and I showed it to my buddy Carl, the producer of Texas Chainsaw, and he loved it. He said, "Oh my God." He said, that's the menace we were trying to capture in Texas Chainsaw 3D, right there in that little short piece. Anyway, I forget where I was going.
You were talking the acting classes and things like that, and the work, and
it was kind of weird because 2 years after that, I was, on the set of Texas Chainsaw 3D with the chainsaw. And a year and a half after that, I was doing press interviews for the release of the movie. And I told that story about Robert Quarry. And it was then I realized, son of a bitch, he was amazingly prescient, in that here I was making a living playing monsters, a monster. Anyway, I thought I was impressed. Anyway,
what's funny, and we'll get into Texas in a minute. Yeah, God bless Robert. You mentioned Carl. Carl was the gentleman that actually talked you into moving to New York, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what he's up to now. We've kind of drifted apart.
Yeah, because what was it? He was buying a hotel or something like that and refurbishing, and
we did a bunch of work on his stuff, and that was just what we always did. But
right on. So was it Crowley?
I'm finished with
sorry,
that.
go ahead.
It all that stuff, just, I'm too old for that shit now. My back won't stand it.
Yeah, well, at least it wasn't you that I set up phone calls for a senior citizen living, but I won't say I did that to Brian when he was moving. So that's a whole nother little haha because I like to mess with people. But so was it Carl that first you came across to try to get in for Texas, or how did the audition process start?
Well, actually, Carl had just bought the rights to Texas Chainsaw when I met him, and we were through this acting class that Frank Tamarello was teaching. We were working on a TV pilot for a kind of a acting reality show of people trying to break into Hollywood. And he was friends with one of the people who was involved in that, and he came over and was helping us out, and that's where we met. We became friends. We found out we had all sorts of stuff in common, and so started hanging out together, smoking cigars and building cabinets and fixing up his house up in the Hollywood Hills. And anyway, it was about, it must have been about 6 months later. I was by then taking classes also with another mutual friend of ours, of Carl's and mine, Jeff Celentano. And Jeff was he really had a director's eye to the whole thing, and that was very helpful. And anyway, we were just sitting around one day in this cigar lounge in Studio City, and Jeff asked Carl how the Texas Chainsaw Massacre project was coming, and Carl was already dealing with Millennium and the nightmare that is that. And Carl said, oh Jesus, don't ask, it's a nightmare. And so Jeff offers, he says, he said, well, have you cast Leatherface yet? He says, oh no, we haven't even thought about it. He said, well, who'd make a great Leatherface? And he caught me totally off guard. He says, Dan. I said, and Carl and I both kind of reacted badly to the notion, because we were friends. I was not, there just to, try and get into a movie. We were genuinely friends, and that's a dicey thing between producers and actors. It's not the kind of relationship conducive to friendship, but we made it through anyway. He came to a play I was doing in North Hollywood at the Mayflower Club. I don't know if you're familiar with the theatrical form of British pantomime.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
All right. So it was a pantomime of Puss in Boots.
Hmm.
My future wife was playing Puss, oddly enough. And I was playing Herbert the Horrible Ogre, the villain of the piece.
The Cockney who drops his H's.
Yes. And they talk about the character through the entire play, and he shows up in the final act, So it was great. It was a very small part, but big impact. And the cast was all a bunch of real Brits, a bunch of mostly tiny Brits. My wife is 5 something, I think she says she's 5'2". I'm not sure.
And you're
Anyway,
6'6", so that makes for an interesting
yeah.
dynamic.
And yeah, I wore boots with heels, so yeah, I come thundering onto the stage and scare the shit. I mean, the literal screams from the audience. It was you got to know how to make an entrance. Anyway, I think it was that entrance that sold Carl on the idea that Jesus, maybe he could do this, because by the end of the evening, after the show was over and we were sitting around having drinks, he was introducing me as Leatherface, and then he kind of backed off on it. He never mentioned it again because he realized he was overstepping his bounds. Because his good friend John Lessenhop was the director and should certainly have a say. And so he kind of finagled a meeting between me and John. John and I had met once at his house, just in passing. Carl and I were working on a project, and John showed up to, talk about the script or something. And we just said hi, and that was it. And I didn't even know who the hell he was. But it was a Christmas party at Carl's house, and there were lots of people there. There must have been 100 people there, and it's a tiny house. And so anyway, John Lessenhop, he wrote the tale of finding Leatherface, an article for the Huffington Post. And he swears it's true. He called me when he was writing it. He wrote it just before the release of the movie, and he called me to check on a couple of details and to make sure I was okay with him referring to my forehead as a cinder block. I said, yes, fine. Use whatever colorful language you need. And so anyway, he wrote this story, how he was in the kitchen of this little open floor plan bungalow in the hills, talking to Mark Berg, Twisted Pictures producer. And he kept looking past Mark as Mark's trying to tell him some salacious story. And he swears it was true that Mark said to him, "You must be some kind of asshole, or she better be really hot. Who the hell are you looking at?" And he says, "I think I'm looking at Leatherface." And I was standing on the other side of the room, just kind of hanging back. I'm not good at parties. I have my drink here and my cigar, and it keeps me calm just talking to you guys. But
what are we drinking tonight?
Highland Park Scotch.
Okay. How would you compare that? I actually saw a bottle downstairs I was to try. Because we're going to do the Shining tonight. So when we're done chatting with you. So how would you describe the Highland Park there, the Scotch?
It's a really, smoky, smooth blend. It's one of the nicest. It's my favorite Scotch. Certainly blended Scotches. I mean, for the price, you can if you get some some Scotch old enough to vote and properly made, it's great. But Highland Park is just a good 12-year-old blend. It's very nice.
We'll have to try that then during our viewing tonight.
I got a question, if I may.
Yes,
you said you're 6'6", right?
Yeah, I was. I'm now 6'5" and either 3/8 or 5/8. I'm shrinking. I measured myself. I got concerned.
Me too, because I was always 6'5".
Yeah.
I was always 6'5", and now they're telling me I'm 6'3 3/4.
You got to drink more water.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm 6'5", and they're like, no, you're just a hair under 6'4" now, and I'm like, no, I'm 6'5". Says so on my ID. But it's so funny, the parallels between you and the first Leatherface.
Yeah.
You know, you're both hulking figures, but very well spoken, very well educated Renaissance men who no one would expect if they knew them that they're this infamous Leatherface.
Yeah. Well,
the doorway.
I object to the characterization of well-educated. I am not well-educated. I didn't make it past that diploma certificate for
architecture school. That's well-educated. Or how about well-read? That's better.
Yeah, I like to read. Because
I'm an author and a historian with only a high school degree. I never went to college.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to have a degree to be successful or well-read or educated, especially if you educate yourself.
Yes, self-educated, definitely.
Yeah. But you're both very well-spoken and soft-spoken and gentle giants that filled the doorway. That's how Toby Hooper always described it. I knew I had my Leatherface when he filled the doorway.
A big. That's an old Irish expression.
Yep.
A big doorway full of a man.
And I'm a big Irishman, so we definitely have to get together and have cigars and wings because
I look forward to it.
Now, do you ever make it up to Buffalo?
It's been a while. We my wife is a British immigrant, and so we had to go there for immigration purposes, but that hasn't been for quite a while. I don't think we have anything coming up, but I love
it's called a weekend. That's what you do. It's coming up. It's a weekend.
Yeah. What is it?
Whatever weekend, because it's only a 2-hour drive from Ithaca to New York. From Buffalo.
It's about 3.5, maybe.
Way to go, Brian.
Well, it takes me about 3.5 to get to Canastota from Buffalo. And Ithaca's before Canastota. But somewhere in there. Yeah. It's worth it for the wings and for the cigar lounge, trust me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, and it's a lovely drive. I mean, Jesus, New York State is just so beautiful. I always love driving through New York State.
Well, it's funny that Brian mentions Gunner and stuff. So when you're on set for, and I don't know if you were there for the early part when they blew up the house and all that fun stuff, but it's like
I made a special point. Yeah, when we were shooting the movie, a few weeks in, a bunch of drama occurred, and
in Hollywood, stop.
Yeah, it was bad. Lots of people, many G5s landed at the airport in Shreveport with executives from Lionsgate and Millennium, and I don't know who else, but anyway, it was bad. And to get the production back on track, they decided, rather than add days to the schedule, which they couldn't afford, which they could afford, but they just didn't want to, they would cut a couple of days of shooting and add a second unit, because the most expensive part of shooting a 3D movie is the cameras. Those cameras were incredible machines, and they were expensive. And so if they put on a second unit, they could keep them running, 2 shifts and basically go 24 hours a day with the equipment. And so I was shooting on second unit. I think we were shooting the scenes out in the woods where well, actually no, it was the scene where Leatherface jumps up out of grandma's open grave and goes chasing after the kids who were coming out of the barn. But anyway, I made it a point to go visit first unit despite needing sleep, just to watch that spectacle. We built a perfect replica of the original house. It was a copy down to the wallpaper of the original house. And, they recreated a lot of the furniture, not all of it there. And just the stuff that was just going to show up on camera. And, that scene where Gunner is sitting by the window, in the living room with the chicken in the cage, the whole bit, it was all there. It was so weird that was the scene in which I met Gunnar Hansen. Nice. It's hard to believe it happened. If you were going to try and come up with some Texas Chainsaw Massacre fantasy thing, how could you make it any better than that? And then to have a film crew there to capture it all, because I have a terrible memory. I'd have to go back and watch all the DVD extras to try and recall. Oh man, it was just so overwhelming. I fanboyed a bit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. Because you got to imagine, you got Gunnar Hansen, which, Brian, you'll appreciate this, is the 2 first VHSs he bought. One of them was the original Texas Chainsaw. But you got Marilyn Burns over here, you got Gunnar Hansen here, you get, you got all Bill Moseley over here. It's like,
gotta
be impressive.
Marilyn was another one. Marilyn was Gunnar and I would say became friends. I visited him at his house up in Mount Desert Island, and we were we never became close friends, but certainly friends. He was just so kind to me, always very considerate. But Marilyn Burns, that was interesting. My first day on set, I had spent the previous week at the sound stage at Millennium Studios working on stunts. The stunt coordinator and his team and I were choreographing everything, including the fight in the butler's pantry and hooking Kenny on the stairs, dragging him down, and just went through everything, hanging him on the hook, just working out all that stuff. And so anyway, I finally get to set, and they had been shooting for a couple of days by the time I got there. And it was at the mansion. And here's Marilyn Burns. And, as a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, Marilyn Burns was always this kind of steamy, had this real, sexy edge to her. And here was this little old lady, and she came up to me, and she spoke very softly, and and she took my hand in both hers, and she held it, and she said, "It's so nice to meet you." And it was just it was so weird. And anyway, she was just lovely. And we got to shoot a couple of things together. I had to carry her out down the steps of the mansion and out to the open grave and put her back in her coffin and all that. And that was the extent of what we were doing together. And it was
go ahead.
It was an awesome experience. And she was just always, it was like burying my own grandmother. I mean, Jesus Christ. Well, going through the scene, they couldn't use any of the footage in the movie because it was so horrendously heart-wrenching to watch and to do. I mean, it was worse to do than it was to watch. And it was, after the movie came out, some promoter wanted to do some event where they were going to get together a bunch of people from the movie. And she called me on the phone. And it was Marilyn Burns, the one I remembered from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, kind of sexy and flirtatious on the phone. And I thought, well, wait a minute. No, maybe this isn't her. Maybe this is some kind of, it was just such a disconnect. And
somebody's
anyway,
messing with you.
Yeah. But we met at this show, and it was her. It absolutely was her. And I realized after meeting her again, and she was so different, that she stayed in character so I would have to bury my own grandmother.
The method actress.
Exactly. And it forced my hand. I am not a method actor by any means. And method acting does not work with Leatherface. I tried it. I lasted about 15 minutes. It is such a horrific character to try and embody that, you basically, it's just too much. It's a level of darkness you never want to approach. And it would be, impossible to function on a movie set in that mode. It's that character is just beyond the reach of method acting. In my experience, maybe somebody else could do it, but I couldn't do it.
It's funny. I've heard actors who've played not Leatherface, but characters very similar, very dark, very foreboding, that say they will go out of their way to be jovial and joking and friendly off camera on set, just so they don't get in that mindset, so they can turn it off when they leave.
Yeah, on set, I lived separate from the rest of the cast. I lived in a house with the producer and the craft services guy and a couple of other people, and everybody else stayed in a hotel in Shreveport. And on set, they always put my chair away from everybody else because I had all the mask stuff and chainsaw stuff, and it was always separate from everybody else. And so I never had much to do with anybody on set. I think the only time we ever had conversation, me and any of the other actors, was at one dinner party during production. There was a picnic they did that was fun. Anyway, twice I think I got to talk to Alexandra and Tanya, and Richard Reel, Tom Berry, Paul Ray. They were all super nice folks. I remember Trey Songz's mother came to set one day. It was out at the barn. She came to visit and brought his little brother. It was interesting because Trey always tried to maintain a measure of cool that none of the rest of us could ever even approach. And then his mom shows. Now what I did.
So I heard somewhere, I was listening to a couple other chats you had, and you said something along the lines of removing a mask is kind of removing a character, but he's actually a person under there. What were you meaning by that?
Well, Gunnar had said in his creation of the character, the way he envisioned it was that, the mask is who he is, and he says if you were to take Leatherface's mask off, you'd find nobody there. It's all within the mask. And it is a wonderful acting kind of shorthand. You put that mask on and you become Leatherface. I would walk around set without the mask on and be able to have conversations with people. But, I noticed nobody even look at me when I had that mask on. I mean, it was as impressive as I think it looked on screen. In reality, it was intimidating even for Teamsters,
And
but you put the mask on and you immediately go into character. You know exactly what you have to do and how to do it, and it's all right there. It's just such a trigger.
Well, and like you said, it was even intimidating for Teamsters because it's so visceral and it's so much a part of pop culture that, even if you're laughing at it, a lot of people watch horror movies to laugh because it's escapism.
Mm-hmm.
But if they come face to face with it, that laughter stops because it's real at that moment. Even though it's not, the separation of reality, but it's such a visceral response to that mask.
Yeah, and it's it's the whole wardrobe. He is a big fucking monster.
And you're a giant, yeah. On top of it.
Yeah. I have a problem just in my Hawaiian shirt, But, in full wardrobe, especially carrying the chainsaw. I remember when we split into two units. The first night shooting, we were shooting the sequence where Leatherface catches the van as it skids outside the gate after crashing through and tries to get away, and he slices the tire and causes it to crash. We were shooting that sequence. That was the first one we were shooting on second unit. And they had a second unit director and first AD. And this first AD, I don't know his name. I don't want to recall because I didn't like the guy. And maybe I shouldn't talk about people I don't like. But anyway, nobody liked this guy. He would be hired by producers because of his reputation as an asshole. They wanted an asshole to run the set. Anyway, I'm standing there at the end of the first shot, chainsaw off and my hand up in the air, and the guy who was supposed to come get the saw was had many other tasks to do, and so I was just waiting, like I was going to do. I didn't want to go walking around with the saw. That's part of the safety part of it. And anyway, this second unit first AD comes up to me and he tries to grab the saw. And I told him, get the fuck away from me. Scared the hell out of him. And, he backs off and Forrest, the chainsaw guy, comes running over. Says, oh, sorry. I was, anyway, it kind of set the tone for our relationship for the rest of the shoot. But, I forget what brought up that thought.
Well, I think we should end with a positive story. And even I think we should go with a positive story here, Dan. And you told us one during our event, but you came across and met Tobe Hooper one time. And this was to set the scene. The movie hits #1 in a time period that nobody thinks will happen in January, etc. But there's a party, and you guys come across at a party and end up sitting for hours, and we're the last two at this venue or house or wherever it was. Can you tell that story?
It was another party at Carl's house, the producer. We, I knew Tobe Hooper was going to be there, and I knew he liked cigars, so I showed up with 2 good cigars in my pocket. And by the end of the evening, we had sat and talked for hours. He told me he said one of the things I remember he said was he was so pleased to finally see Leatherface on the screen again, the character he wrote, back in 1973. And anyway, it went on so long that we were the last ones at the party. My wife was ready to go. It was 3 a.m. and everybody else was gone, and I finally had to face the fact that I was going to have to leave. And anyway, exhausted, we were saying our goodbyes, and Toby says, I want to give you a hug. And he hugs me. I'd take a hug any day from Tobe Hooper. And anyway, I was really struck with just how genuinely kind he was. And I'd heard a lot of stories about Tobe Hooper, about how he was a bit of an asshole. And, my experience was nothing like that. He was just such a genuinely kind and generous man, I mean, spending time with me. He didn't know me. Anyway, that was, I have nothing but fond memories of Tobe Hooper. And that was really the only time we ever got together. I think our paths crossed one other time at some other event. There was a possibility he and I were going to do the commentary track for the DVD together, but they rearranged it, and I ended up doing it with John Lessenhoff. That was fun. John had a lot of insights he hadn't shared during the shoot, so it was interesting for me.
Absolutely. Brian, do you have something you'd like to add?
I just want to say it's been such a pleasure to finally talk to you. Like I said, I've been a fan and admirer, and
well, thank you, Brian.
And we've got to get together and have wings and cigars on me, and you will love it. And yeah, and just
Notice I wasn't invited, by the way.
well, hell no. Do you know how many wings he looks like he could eat?
Yeah, this is true.
But
I'll buy you some wings, Jonathan.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. But we'll
Dan,
make this happen.
I'd also like to say that I'm glad you've embraced your inner Leatherface.
Mm-hmm.
And do you ever do the cons or anything like that? I mean,
I stopped doing them a few years ago. My spine issues really got the better of me there for a couple of years. I'm feeling better now, to where I could probably get on a plane and go somewhere. But there was a while there where you do a con, it's showbiz. People want to come up, they want to talk to you, and they want to have an interaction. And that's part of the contract, is you're there for the fans. And I just couldn't rise to the occasion for quite a while, but I'm starting to feel like maybe I could get back into it. I was on so many painkillers for a long time, man.
That's the kind of gig you can't do if you're physically not feeling it, because you can't mentally do it.
I could, and I just couldn't do it for 8 to 10 hours, and be a reasonable person,
Exactly. But I'm sure the fans would see you again.
Yeah. No, I'll get out there again one of these days. I haven't signed up for any yet. Couple of possibilities, but nothing
But
sure.
I will have Jonathan get you my information,
Yeah.
and I'll
please
get
do.
yours if possible, and we'll definitely meet up and continue this, because we also have a lot in common, and I find that fascinating. Now, and we look alike. Ask Jonathan,
I'll be
except
darned.
I have long hair.
You poor thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I kept telling Brian, you'll love Dan. And this is weeks ago before we even did this. He's like, I wasn't sure if he believed me, but Brian.
Huh.
I absolutely did. It's been such a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me as well.
And I will get you guys connected for sure. Dan, thank you so much, sir.
All right. It was fun.
And I think there's a part 2 in here somewhere, but we'll figure it out.
Hey folks, looking for the ultimate destination for the nerd enthusiasts and collectors? Well, we found the spot for you. Nerds Nest Collectibles is a haven for nerds, geeks, and fans alike, as they have many different products and certainly more to come. Make sure you go ahead and visit them at nerdsnestcollectibles.com. Check them out.
Hey there, it's Alan Troutman, Tarman from Return of the Living Dead, and if there's anybody you should listen to, it's me, about listening to Crazy Train Radio. Go do it. Go away. Do it now.